This is the demo for College Algebra, Lesson 5. This section, or this lesson, is going to deal with models and application. Many of you will recognize these as word problems. One of our goals today is to develop some strategies to help us solve these story opportunities in order to become more confident and competent problem solvers. Let's begin by looking at the following bar graph that shows the number of concussions sustained between NFL backup players and starters in 2010. So starters looks like they had 50-something concussions, and backup players had a bit over 100. And then if I wanted to figure out exactly how many, right, I can't quite tell from this graph, but I have this little story opportunity that will help us figure it out. So the number of concussions reported for backup players was 6 less than twice the number reported for NFL starters. So combined, the total number of reported concussions for these NFL players was 159. How many concussions were reported for NFL backup players and starters in 2010? So strategies is to read the problem carefully, identify or describe in words the quantity or quantities you're being asked to find. I say identify the question, right? So I like to just go back and underline it. And here it is. How many concussions were reported for backup players and for starters? So we'll identify that. How many concussions for backups and how many for starters? So there's two questions. How many concussions for backup players? How many concussions for starters? Then we're going to assign a variable. We'll name it X, or you can pick any other letter, to one of the unknown quantities. So I have two unknown quantities. I'm going to assign a letter to one of them. So we could talk about how we decide. So I'm going to look at the sentence where they say, the number of concussions for backup players was 6 less than twice the number for starters. So if you knew the number for starters, you could calculate the number for backup players by doubling it and subtracting 6, right? So if there were exactly 100 concussions for starters, then backup players would have 6 less than twice that. So 200 minus 6, 194. So I'm going to use the NFL starters number of concussions as my variable, because if I know that, I can calculate the concussions for backup players using it. So we're going to let X equal number of concussions for starters. And then we want to write all other unknown quantities in terms of this variable. So the number of concussions for backup players okay, so if we know how many there are for starters, we double it and subtract 6 because of this sentence here. 6 less than, that would be subtraction, twice the number. So double, subtract 6. So we do 2x minus 6. That's how many concussions there are for backup players. Then we ask ourselves, what equals what? So we go back to the question, and the question said that combined, the starters and backup players had 159 concussions. So the starters have X concussions, the backup players have 2X minus 6 concussions, and when I combine those two by adding them, I should get a total of 159 concussions. Finally, we solve this equation and find all the unknown quantities. So this says 3x minus 6 is 159. So 3x is 165. Divide both sides by 3, and we get x equals 55. Right? So that is our x value, but then we want to find all the unknown quantities and write a sentence that answers the question. Okay, so X, remember, we defined as the number of concussions for starters. So we would say starters had 55 concussions. And they also asked us how many concussions the backup players had. And we defined that to be 2x minus 6. So backups, that was 2x minus 6. So I'm going to do 2 times 55 minus 6. 110 minus 6 is 104. Okay, so backups had 104 concussions. Last, we should check our answer using the original wording of the problem, not the equation we obtained, right? So because we could have misinterpreted the words into an equation, so we just want to make sure this makes sense, right? Do the backup players with 104 concussions, do they have 6 less than twice as many as the starters? They do, because twice as many of the starters is 110, and they have 6 less than that.